Thanks for joining the Prosperous Sellers Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Yates, CEO of Prime Guidance, and I've got a special guest, Dan Scala, here with us. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Steve. Throughout my career, I've bounced back and forth amongst several different things, several different vertical markets. Currently, I'm the CEO at AgencyTHE, which is a performance marketing firm that also has a specialization in data engineering. I'm also the head of the product at Forward Online, where we build platforms to be able to assist agencies and advertisers to be able to excel in the space of e-commerce. But throughout my career, I've worked in med tech, I've worked in retail directly, and worked at a company that actually got acquired by Google that built ad tech as well.
Very cool. I know you've got extensive background. I've known you for many years, and you've got a lot of experience. So, when you look at, some of the more important elements to being successful in an e-commerce and marketplace environment, what would you say are some things that sellers really need to hone in on?
Yeah, I think this is where you and I have talked in the past, Steve, is product metadata is one of the most critical, in my opinion. People don't buy categories, consumers, right? They buy products. Mm-hmm. So when you're in that consumer product space, being able to have a strong product title, a strong product description, and strong on-page optimized data is really important. It's important to the shopper when they get to your website, but it's also, per what you guys do, very important on the marketplaces, right? And it's also important now more than ever for search optimization, right? Because now, there's crawlers for social media platforms, and there's crawler for ChatGPT, right? Which we can talk about more in a few minutes. And then, of course, the stereotypical search crawlers that you would think of in Google and Microsoft. But that information is really important for on-site merchandising too, right? To give the shopper a great experience, whether it's D2C and you have a Magento, a Shopify site, Salesforce Commerce, Oracle Commerce, whatever it is that you're using, so that they can find the product easily, right? And also so that the product clearly defines all of the appropriate features and incentivizes the sale, right? And I think, again, that's important both for their D2C channels and their marketplace channels.
Yeah, Prime Guidance focuses primarily on marketplaces. So when I know you do a lot of things, more broadly in e-commerce, how do you optimize your metadata differently across these channels? What are some of the algorithmic decisions you might put into play to say, we need to kind of approach this a little different for Google, this is a little different for the AI tools, this for Amazon, and so forth?
Yeah, those are good questions. So Channel Intelligence, where I worked last before starting AgencyTHE about 13 years ago, was one of the industry leaders in feed management, right? We had our own platform that allowed us to consume product data from large retailers and brands, and then disperse it outwardly to all of the endpoints, whether that was product shopping channels back in the day of Nextag and BizRate, which mostly don't exist anymore, or whether it's Google Shopping, and then, of course, marketplaces, right? Like Amazon or Walmart, et cetera. And something that I've learned throughout the years is that you have to take a look at not only the feed specifications, as it's called, of what are the character limits for each of the attribute fields, whether that's product title or product description, but making sure that you harvest out key attributes and you put those in the appropriate areas in the feeds that are sent, right? So when there's a strongly typed color field, are you breaking out that this shirt is blue, right? Because if you do not, you're going to be less found on that particular location. In addition to that, they give you these character limits, whether it be, let's say, 60, 70, or 80 characters on a product title for a particular endpoint, Google Shopping, Amazon, whatever. You also need to think about what's shown for mobile, because shoppers these days are predominantly shopping on a mobile device. Yep. So how does it look not only, right, on a mobile browser, but how does it look in app? right? So for Amazon, for what you guys do, I'd be curious to see how you guys optimize for Amazon, thinking of the Amazon app, which I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm assuming it's got to be well over 20% of purchases made on Amazon now are done through the Amazon mobile app. And I would assume that that shopping experience is a little unique. So how do you guys manage that in the marketplace front?
Yeah, great question. So when we help our clients optimize their titles on Amazon, we definitely are looking at having the most critical elements in the beginning of the title. So the first 60 characters or so, if that is truncated on mobile, is it telling the story? Is there enough there to tell the consumer, this is the brand, this is the type of product, this is like the model, for example. And then clearly go into more detail in the title on a desktop version, but in mobile, you need to be short, sweet, and succinct. And you need to try and make sure that it's balanced for both. There's rumors that Amazon's going to be rolling out a short title and a long title for that that intent. But right now, we're having to make sure that we're optimizing for both. Not only that, are we having to make sure we're putting our mobile first hat on all the time, because so many customers are shopping on mobile. That's where the vast majority of people are shopping. They're adding to the cart. They may ultimately go back and make their purchase on desktop, but that initial interaction with the consumer on mobile is so critical. So we like to make sure that a customer is flipping through the images and can tell the entire story just by visuals, text on the visuals to have like infographics to tell the story. The title should be very explanatory. And any content that you're developing needs to be very short, succinct, easily readable on mobile, so you don't have to zoom in and out trying to figure out what is this product on a mobile device. So those are the most important elements that we kind of optimize for mobile. Nowadays, we're having to also look at the different search algorithms and make sure that we're optimizing for them as well. So you've got your standard search on Amazon, and you've got the new elements, Cosmos and Rufus that are allowing consumers to interact. So with Cosmos, it's actually looking at more complete picture, like even images, and helping to paint a picture of what the consumer is looking at. And with Rufus, it's actually analyzing products and helping answer questions for consumers. You really have to look at all of those things when you're optimizing these days and say, am I really optimizing for all of those different use cases, and balancing it, because the vast majority of people are still searching for things the way they used to, like, for example, men's shoes, white Nike or something. They're not exactly the way that you would necessarily search for them, because their train of thought narrows the search. They're narrowing their keywords, and you have to be optimized for that. But you also have to be answering questions like, is this a good, what are some good shoes for running, or whatever, where Rufus may come into play. And Google has a lot of similar differences in behavior, right? Those consumers may not be yet ready to make a purchase. They may not have a purchase intent in their search query, and you have to make sure you're speaking to that in the data that you're filling in for all this metadata, right?
Very true. I don't know what you find on Amazon, but as a tangent off of this, when we're talking about optimizations of PDPs, right, product detail pages, and direct to consumer, review data being so critical, right? And Amazon, you're fortunate as a merchant because the buy box is what it is on the product detail page, right? Like, you see a review star rating right there. You see an add to cart button that's very clear. Buy instantly if that's what you want to do as a shopper. But in direct to consumer, you need to build that experience. Shopify and some of these SaaS platforms have gotten people a lot of the way there, but review data, as I was saying before, is so critical, especially when you're a brand, right? Or you're a retailer of products that are lesser known, right? because in those instances, consumers want to be reassured that they're buying the right thing. So AI makes its recommendations with some of these AI tools that are now available in certain shopping experiences. But then the review data for those higher dollar or higher consideration purchases, we see people frequently clicking on the star rating to actually read some of the reviews, because we tag that accordingly in a website analytics tool like a Google Analytics. And that way we know what is the abandonment rate when people read the reviews of this product, of other products in this price point, or other products in this category, versus when they don't click on it and choose to read reviews. What is the conversion rate then? What's add to cart look like? What is completion to order look like? What do you guys find on Amazon? I'm curious, related to reviews.
Reviews matter big time. In fact, there are multiple ways to get reviews on various marketplaces, and it's gotten much more limited. Amazon has the Vine program, the various tiers. You can get up to 30 reviews. They've taken away things like the early reviewer program and such. But Walmart gives you more options for reviews. You can actually ingest your reviews from Shopify. You can do an export, or any other website where you own the reviews. You can do an export and provide it to Walmart, and they have what's called review syndication. They have a bulk upload portion of that, and then they also have a synchronization capability between the big review providers like YachtPub, Power Reviews, Bazaar Voice, and so forth, where it makes a lot of sense if a manufacturer has its own e-commerce website that they would consider deploying one of those review platforms, so that anytime a customer leaves a review on Walmart, on their website, on a variety of other key retailer websites, it's all aggregated and synchronized seamlessly across all those channels. They're pretty expensive, but if reviews are important on Walmart to you, and you don't want to have to manually ingest them, that's a really good way to do it. So we think reviews are hugely critical. Amazon does too. Amazon's become the leader of reviews. And what I encourage people to think about is, even if your core business is done off of Amazon, whether it's retailers or your e-commerce website, customers that don't know and trust your brand yet, they will often go to Amazon, even if they're not intending to buy on Amazon, just to read the reviews, because it's such a trusted source. And Amazon has done such a good job nurturing good quality reviewers that those customers will go back and update their reviews a year into it, where they don't typically do that on other e-commerce websites. One thing that I like to frequent when making purchases is Costco. And Costco has very skewed reviews versus Amazon, because the Costco reviewers tends to review right away after purchase, and their initial impressions are spot on. But if you look at that same product on Amazon and that product's been selling for a year, you might get much different results. So I like to compare those two and see kind of initial, appeal, and then also long-term, quality of the product using an Amazon review. So I think both are critical.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because as a shopper of Amazon, if I, for example, were to buy a battery backup for my home, right? Because I have some computing equipment at my house. So I was going to buy a sine wave AVR battery backup, right? And they're $200 to $400, let's say. So I will read the reviews on those on Amazon before I purchase them. And the ones that I look for are the ones that have photos of the actual product unboxed and in action, right? Because it shows me that the product was actually utilized by that person, and therefore their feedback is usually more valuable. So to your point, it's not like, hey, I got it and I unboxed it and looked fine, worked as expected. It's more in-depth, multiple paragraphs. So I see a lot more of that on Amazon than I do elsewhere. I actually had a short stint where with a partner, I built out a platform for a hot minute called Zippy Reviews, which we have now deprecated and shut down. But one of the places that we were aggregating reviews from was Amazon, right? because Amazon reviews are more in depth and seem to be always less biased, right? You also mentioned something that I thought was important. You mentioned some of those review provider organizations like Yahoo, Power Reviews. I've used verified reviews now, reviews.io. There's, a bunch of them out there. Yeah. One thing that's interesting is I see a lot of synergy between what's happening in the marketplace world and platforms and technology that's occurring in the D2C world. And sometimes even in the reverse, like Shop with Prime, for example, right? But related to those review providers, that's what we normally suggest for D2C advertisers, right? Hey, listen, you've got an Amazon channel and that's great. Let's focus on reviews there. But when you sign up with somebody like a verified reviews, let's say you started and you were prioritizing at the time your Amazon presence, verified reviews will slurp in all of the reviews from your Amazon listings, right? To give you a kickstart on your direct-to-consumer website. Also, those are certified review partners for Google Shopping, right? So there's a list of 25 to 40 of them where those are highly likely to be utilized under certain search experiences that Google offers to shoppers on Google Shopping, where those reviews are properly syndicated and utilized because they're a third-party approved partner of Google. So then you win twice, right? In your instance, they can syndicate those reviews seamlessly ongoing to Walmart and some of these other marketplaces, maybe not Amazon. But in some instances, they could have started with the Amazon data, right? So now you have that head start. So to your point, while they can cost you a couple of dollars, I always recommend from a conversion rate optimization standpoint for direct-to-consumer brands that they absolutely sign up once they've achieved a certain amount of revenue throughput on their website to sign up with one of those kind of third-party guys.
Yeah, I'm surprised how many brands that we talk to, you go to their website and they don't have reviews. It's like Amazon has basically made this a prerequisite for a purchase decision, and there's still brands out there that don't embrace it. I think it's oftentimes fear. They don't want any of their products to be, rated inferior in reviews, so they just don't want to show them. And I think it's the wrong way to look at it. What do you think about that?
Maybe a quick deviation, but sort of related is I think Amazon creates the shopping experience that everyone expects elsewhere for almost everything. Because sometimes when we're talking to brands, we say, who's your ideal customer, right? Who's going to buy this product from you? And what does their household income look like? What age are they? Yada, 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 right? But while their product may have a demographic of this, the Amazon shopper is everyone, right? So if everyone's buying on Amazon, they're already used to the accoutrements that Amazon makes available to them as a shopper. So when you as a direct-to-consumer brand or retailer don't offer similar, value propositions such as reviews, to your point, you miss out because the shopper is trained to expect that. Right? Maybe not if they're buying $5 in toilet paper, but certainly when they're buying something that's 200, 500, 1,000 and up, absolutely, right? A nicer sweater or a new TV. People want to at least see the star rating, even if they're not going to dive into reading all of the reviews, right? That way they feel more confident before they purchase. So I think it's interesting how Amazon trains customers on what to expect on all of these other websites. So if Amazon's doing something, we always take note of it. That way we can implement it for our client on the Shopify side, on the Oracle Commerce side, whatever it is, together with that retailer or that brand, or at least consult them to have them do that. Because when we're managing the media, we may find the best possible customer for them with media that we're buying with the right intent, maybe even the right audience and the right intent. That's the perfect scenario. But if your page is not optimized and you're missing the things that shoppers are trained to be used to on Amazon, you're going to miss out on that conversion. Probably. Doesn't matter that you have the right product. They'll just find the right product from somebody else now because they're not confident that you're going to be able to ship it on time, or that you're going to offer them a good experience if the product goes bad in 7 days or whatever, right? So I think all of those things become critical that Amazon has trained shoppers to be expectant of.
Yeah, I totally agree. They have set the bar, and they've done it in so many different ways. I remember, I mean, you and I go way back in e-commerce, and I remember when Amazon first rolled out Sunday delivery. Consumers they didn't even demand that. They weren't asking for it. Amazon said, how can we please our customers more? And they delivered on something they didn't even ask for. And I remember years ago when they rolled out 2-day fast shipping, and a lot of other retailers were 5 to 7 days shipping. The other retailers mocked them and said, there's no way that's going to work. It's too costly. It'll never, the customers don't even care to get it that fast. Amazon knew that would help build customer loyalty and trust and satisfaction. That was something that they weren't even asking for, and they delivered. And now it's become the new norm. Now you're dealing with 1-day delivery, same-day delivery, like Walmart just had Walmart Plus week, and they had a promotion that you can get, if you're a Walmart Plus member, a free express delivery within an hour to 75 minutes. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and all of this has tended to be set by Amazon constantly raising the bar for other e-commerce retailers to achieve, and it holds everybody to a higher standard, which I think is ultimately good for the customer.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting, the evolution, to your point about the Sunday delivery thing. I heard a rumor that that was actually called by postal workers, the employees, as Amazon Sundays, right? Because that's why they were out there on a Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting, again, how Amazon has set the bar, and other people are expectant, because everybody is an Amazon customer, to follow suit, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of Hugo Boss as a customer, and it's interesting. This was 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years ago now. You go to their website, and they had a way to be able to ship you a product in 2 days, because you're spending $150, $200 on a button down, and you're going, wait a minute, I can buy toilet paper from Amazon and I can get it in 2 days. Why, when I'm spending a premium price on a button down, can I not get it in 2 days? So again, they have to play catch up. Also, kind of interesting, my retail experience was as a store manager at Best Buy back in 2003 to 2006-ish. And I went back into my old store here in Orlando, Florida, recently, maybe 9 months ago, something like that. And I look around, and the store looks completely different. And I'm like, where did the rest of the store go? So I talked to one of my former team members, who's now the general manager of the store. And I said, Juan, what happened? What'd you guys do with the store? And he goes, 40% of the store now is online fulfillment. So it's interesting seeing brick and mortar retailers that are evolving to be able to stay relevant in the Amazon era, I'll call it. So Best Buy saying, kind of like Walmart, we'll try to deliver key products fast to you through last mile delivery services, right? Because when you buy online, people want to get it immediately, right? So it's interesting watching that evolution, where now some of these brick and mortar stores are mini warehouses, because people aren't going as frequently as they used to into a Best Buy to try before they buy, or to showroom it, right? Because at one point when I was there, some people joked that we were Amazon's showroom for electronics, right? So people would come into the store, and then they would try to find it for cheaper on Amazon. And then Best Buy, as a corporate policy, began matching Amazon.com. So when we sensed, our team, that that's what was occurring, we could mention, hey, listen, if you were thinking that you might be able to find a better price online, why don't we just check it right now together? And we're happy to price match that if we thought that that customer was leaving for that reason. So again, Amazon sets that bar of consumer expectation.
Best Buy, I think, is a model example of someone that has evolved as the times have changed. And I'm impressed with how they have handled themselves with their omni-channel experience, in-store pickup, ship from store, the price matching. their focus on good quality mobile app and everything. I think they've done it really well, and I'm still surprised going into a retail store like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something, and you ask, hey, this is cheaper on Amazon, can get a price match. It still seems very disconnected. Like, oh, we don't do that. And then I say, well, let me talk to a manager, and they always do. It's just, as long as it ships from and sold by Amazon, they'll pretty much honor it. But it's not part of their culture or their company policy or whatever. And I think they lose a lot of customers to showrooming because the consumer goes in there to buy a DeWalt drill and they can see that it's $100 cheaper on Amazon. What customer is not going to say, I can wait till tomorrow and get it unless I need it at that very moment? And then they're going to be probably disgruntled that they had to pay $100 more for something they could have gotten cheaper. It's like, I don't think it's a good policy for these retailers to not match pricing. And I like to see the retailers that evolved. And I think Lowe's and Home Depot, generally, I've actually done a pretty good job evolving as well. But I think COVID, as much as that was like really hurtful to the country, health-wise, we've lost a lot of loved ones and so forth. It was an interesting thing to see how Americans and worldwide consumers and businesses all rallied together to kind of like figure out how to get through this. And there's a lot of retailers that had no vision for in-store pickup or ship from store or whatever, that were forced to basically say, if I'm going to survive this, I have to adapt. And I think the consumer is better off because of those adaptations, and the businesses are better off because it forced some businesses to adapt when otherwise they may have had a slow death, like a frog in boiling water. And I think Best Buy is a really good example of one that's kind of thrived.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So my particular store, ironically, was connected to the district office for most of the stores that are in Central Florida here. So there's like 12 or 13 stores that this district office was responsible for. So needless to say, the district staff would frequently walk my store, and we were usually one of the leaders as a result of that, right? Because of that added pressure. And you could come up to somebody in customer service that was an hourly employee and say, hey, will you match Amazon? And they knew exactly what the company policy was because of that reason, in part. And as soon as the policy shifted, they immediately knew how to be able to handle that, which was great. But to your point, it was interesting watching the evolution of Best Buy, where they began miniaturizing their footprint for Best Buy wireless stores and saying, hey, this is a profitable piece of our business, but we can have a smaller footprint and we can just offer this service that's good and profitable, right? People would love to be able to talk to somebody in person. Not a lot of people want to change from Verizon to T-Mobile online. They want to talk to somebody and say, how is it in this local market, right? So they saw that as an opportunity to be able to edge out people like Amazon where they can't offer that in-person experience, right? So kind of interesting.
I think that's right. They competed in a way that they can compete in, right? So they have educated staff that knows what they're talking about. They may not be able to compete on assortment, but they can compete on the knowledge of their associates, the ability to walk in and pick up the most urgent things right away. And their Geek Squad, I think, has done a great job of saying, hey, we're here for you. You can get, your TV mounted on the wall by, an expert. And there's a lot of things that they can kind of accentuate as their strength and really run with it. And I think that there's a lot of retailers that I think are doing just that. They're realizing that the size of my store isn't necessarily my strategic advantage anymore. I can't compete with Amazon. I used to be the biggest selection in town. Now Amazon's the biggest selection in town everywhere. So how do we just refine the assortment and make sure that we're offering greater services, experiential shopping, and so forth? Do you have any take on, what efforts retailers that are, I know you do a ton of e-commerce, business, where retailers can kind of embrace some of these things and make sure that their online experience is as strong as possible? Hey, Dan, can you hear me?
Steve, can you still hear me? I think I got disconnected there for a second
Oh.
on the audio front.
No problem. Can you hear me now? You can't hear me, apparently. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? No luck? Hold on.
I can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes. So we've made.
Okay.
Sorry for the switch, but ironic that we were just talking about a consumer electronics retailer that could have sent the Geek Squad to help me with my technical problem. Funny that you brought up the Geek Squad. One of my first jobs when I worked for Best Buy was I participated in the national launch as a Geek Squad agent, as they were called back then. So I used to come into people's homes and their small businesses to be able to help them with a myriad of computer-related problems, whether it was removal of viruses or setting up networks or whatever. So it's funny that you mentioned the Geek Squad as a value proposition. And the president of North America Retail, and this will be the last Best Buy story I tell, once was on the internal communication method that was called Tag TV that we disseminated information to stores with. And he said, Best Buy will either win in the home with great service or we will be out of business because of Amazon in 10 years. So it's interesting that they, to your point, have progressed the Geek Squad where now that covers other services. And now you can buy basically full coverage where you can phone them to be able to assist you remotely with almost any technological woe that you have. So it's interesting watching that evolution with it.
Yeah.
I'd love to chat a little bit about, if we've got a few more minutes, about data analysis and things like that. I'm curious what you guys do on the marketplace front with Amazon and Walmart and some of the big marketplaces, what you guys usually consume, how you guys utilize that data to fuel the decisions that you make for clients at Prime Guidance. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, we work with a wide variety of clients, those just getting started, and those doing billions of dollars in revenue as a total company. Our larger clients do in excess of $150 million a year on Amazon alone. So the needs of their data analysis differ a lot. Because we're a consultancy, we don't necessarily have to force the same reporting suite on all of our clients or anything. So we're just suggesting, based on their scale and their business needs, what level of analysis tools they may benefit from. So some of the earlier sellers, those that are just kind of getting started, they may simply just use something like Helium 10 and or their ad management solution to do general reporting and analysis. You get into mid-tier and they might use something like a seller board or one of those types of tools, and then you get into the larger companies and they're using the more advanced reporting suites like Stackline and such. So it really depends. Obviously, Amazon, Walmart, they all have their own suite of reports. We're always making sure that our clients are really dissecting them and leveraging them to the best of their abilities, including brand analytics. That's got some amazing data in Amazon. But I know you really specialize in this, so I'd love to hear your thoughts around how do you interact with your clients, and what type of data do you look at, and tools that you offer and things like that.
Yeah, so together with a business partner of mine for Forward, we've actually built a platform that AgencyTHE uses under the brand name Marketing Command. And with that, we can ELT all of the data from almost anywhere, whether it be Amazon, Amazon ads, Google Search Console, Oracle Commerce, Demandware, doesn't matter, right? Email platforms, again, doesn't matter. There's, I think, about 150 connectors or so that we have available. So then we pull in all of that data into a centralized database, right? A data warehouse, very simply put, right? And from there, we're able to manipulate that data in ways to be able to look at it more intelligently. In my experience over the last 20 years with e-commerce and coming from a company purchased by Google that tracked 1 in 6 global e-commerce transactions outside of China with first-party technology at Channel Intelligence, I've been doing this a long time. And something that I frequently saw, even sometimes with bigger agencies, is a lot of people think like marketers when they're doing data analysis and data engineering work, rather than thinking like a mathematician, right? Because at the end of the day, marketing data analysis is no different than actuarial tables, for lack of a better way to put it, right? You're trying to forecast the future based on past events in an ideal situation, right? That way you can have trained data models when you're fueling AI or ML algorithms, which is what makes it so important for people that are not giant retailers where they're afraid of giving Google data to train Google, for instance, right? Because now with Performance Max campaigns, if you're running some subset of your Google Ads campaigns as PMax, you have to train that model. That way it performs better. So if you don't use the G tag, you can't train that model, right? Or when are conversions occurring? So on and so forth, right? What context are you giving that algorithm? On our end, though, we try to think more holistically with the data analysis to understand, what are the pivot points that can be effectuated in media campaigns, right? So on Amazon, there is no such thing, when I last looked at it, at least personally, in Amazon advertising for sponsored products to do geo-targeting, right? Still
True.
correct, I'm assuming? Okay.
Yep.
So in that instance, I've seen people go down rabbit holes sometimes and they go, aha, I figured it out. I sell less of my product in direct-to-consumer on Georgia, when direct-to-consumer makes up 20% of the revenue and Amazon makes up 80% of the revenue. Then they're logging into, the Amazon console and they're, I just spent an hour and a half figuring out the answer to a problem that I can effectuate no change, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing that I would always say when you're doing a data analysis, especially on your own, is that you need to think backwards. What can I do with an inquiry that I think might be interesting, other than that's interesting? How will you effectuate a change? Even if it's not in your media campaigns, will you change the products that you will begin carrying or that you will manufacture? Okay. Will you change the price points of those products? Maybe, right? But at the end of the day, if there's no end point and conclusion to something you can do that's useful for your business with the find that you will end up with in the data analysis, you should halt immediately, because otherwise you're spinning your wheels to find out something that we used to joke at CI is interesting. You found out something that's really interesting that you can do absolutely nothing with that's useful for your business. But something that we frequently find is, and we've even helped other agencies. We're a friend to agencies here too, where we'll help them to better understand their clients' data so that they can fuel their decision-making on the work that they do for their client, right? Because a lot of agencies don't want to do this work in-house, or they don't have the in-house capability, whatever that might be. So in those instances, we're helping them to understand, you've got a coffee brand, and look at this guy bought 70 bags of coffee in 1 month. Are you trying to grow a wholesale relationship in general for this particular brand? No. So these are consumer sales, and that's what you're prioritizing for this client. Yes. Okay, well, this guy that bought 70 bags of coffee is not repeatable based upon that strategy. Therefore, you need to remove him as we pivot on certain indexes, because he falls outside of your standard deviation, right? And again, that goes back to, they thought like marketers, they didn't think like a mathematician, right? So you have to remove those kinds of anomalies so that you can get to the heart of what's really going on. So what I've frequently found when people are using the funnels of the world, the Ninja Cats, the Whatagraphs, they're not bad tools, but a lot of the time, if you feed them all of this data and you haven't manipulated any of the data, right? So it becomes an ELT situation, but if you're not transforming the data, so extract, load, and then transform, if you never complete that final step, you might be rushing as an advertiser or as an agency to make a very poor decision quicker, right? So like now you're using a tool that helped you to make that bad decision in 30 minutes rather than in 3 hours. So you save 2.5 hours, but ironically, you may have a higher degree of confidence that you've discovered the right thing. And now you're putting more on black on the roulette table, right? And you're going, let's put $100,000 on this idea, but you didn't remove those anomalies, right? Or you didn't apply human understanding to it. Like, maybe I should try to sell more of this brand, Timberland boots, right? Everywhere. It performs great in New Jersey. And the conversion rate is by far the best of any cowboy or Western boot or boot that we sell. Fantastic. Yeah, but if you tried to sell Timberlands in the state of Texas, they're not interested in that because people in Texas in general, in aggregate, don't wear Timberlands. They would buy Justin or Ariat or some of these other brands or Durango, right? So now you've come into a situation where geo-targeting and the brand becomes relevant because of style, right? Yeah. Do people dress the same way in Manhattan that they do in Milwaukee, Wisconsin? No, of course not. They're completely different demographics. So especially with things like apparel, you have weather conditions that come into play. You have style conditions that come into play. What do people want to wear? What do people feel looks good to their peers, to their coworkers, to their family, whatever? So you have to apply human understanding on top of the data as well, right? And AI and ML is great to be able to help you if you've perfectly trained your data and you've given it all of the data points of everything that's happened in the past and what's about to happen in the future. Perfect example, if you use an MMM, right? Like let's say you try using Google Meridian. And from there, you input all of this data and it tells you, hey, you spent a lot of money on Google Shopping advertising this specific product. It doesn't convert well. Stop doing that, right? Let's say that's the outcome of something that you get from it. The problem with that can be that it doesn't know that that product is going on sale at 30% off tomorrow. And now you've eliminated that product. Because if you're a bigger advertiser, or even if you're a smaller advertiser, but you have a wealth of products, thousands of products, right? Which is common, especially in apparel. You run into this problem frequently where, you know, you're blowing out last season's style to make room for this season's style. Well, when that happens, it's striking through these names as quickly as possible. But now you've taken it away from advertising, which may not be what you want to do, because you've holistically trusted the outcome of AI or ML without applying that human intelligence, right? So those are two big things that I frequently see in the data engineering, data warehousing, and data analysis world is lack of a removal of anomalies and lack of application of human insights and intelligence on top of AI or ML, right? Because it's great. It can be great technology, right? It can analyze that data in no time flat, but you have to apply that layer on top of it because you and the advertiser know the product best, you as the agency, right?
I think a lot of businesses get overwhelmed by data. They don't know how to get the most out of it. And I like what you said about analyzing what you can actually impact. I think that was really good because we're not looking for interesting finds. We're looking for things we can action. We talked about some of them. You know, could we adjust our pricing? Do we have things that are poorly converting? Are we having products that have low click-through rates where we need to adjust our image or price or title? You know, these are things that all have action items. Like when we look at data, we're uncovering these action items. Like this is what the data is telling us. Somehow your conversion rate dropped because you changed your A+ content, or your click-through rate dropped because you increased your price. Now you're no longer competitive on a search result page or whatever. So understanding like what are the levers I'm going to have to pull. And I love that you highlighted that the data can be misleading if you don't scrub it and actually isolate the anomalies. Because if you were to have a bulk sale, right, and you didn't account for this happening last March, and now you're buying new inventory, and you're buying inventory based on simply last first quarter's inventory movement, and you didn't realize that, oh, there was a bulk sale in there, you're going to buy too much this year, right? You've got to isolate these anomalies and say, what do I need to do differently about those anomalies? And that's one example where I can't expect to replicate that. Maybe I can learn from those anomalies and say, wow, I'm getting a lot of business to business purchases. How do I accentuate that part of the business and really go after businesses? Maybe I need to offer special business pricing. Maybe there was a certain event that you ran last year that you hadn't, without looking at the data, you wouldn't have remembered that I've got to comp that event. It was a great sale. We just nailed it. It drove a lot of revenue. Now, if I'm not looking at the data to uncover those insights, I'm going to miss out. So I think those are really important. And then just trying to figure out what can you really leverage the data to tell you for baseline insights. Like we had a client that sold home decor products, and their products continued to be, well represented, great reviews, great pricing. All of a sudden the trend changed and consumers didn't want farmhouse style home decor. They wanted more modern home decor. So if you could tag your different products and then look at the baseline and say, here's how much these are varying and growing by color schema, by style, by gender, whatever it is, and make sure that you're spotting changes and you're adapting. Otherwise, you're paying attention to this. And of course, lifetime value is a great one that if you're not measuring, you probably aren't spending enough in some areas on customer acquisition because you're only looking at the first sale as it relates to the cost of advertising versus I just got this customer to engage. Now they're on subscribe and save, or they're likely to come back and buy 4 times this year. Once I've got that customer hooked on my consumable item, it's kind of done. They're gonna love it and they're gonna want to continue to consume it. I can spend a lot more on new customer acquisition. So if you're not looking at the data in all of those ways, you're perhaps potentially missing out. I've seen a lot of companies that aren't investing enough in advertising than their peers because they're not looking at lifetime value, and their peers are spending a lot more on advertising because they are looking at lifetime value and they're spending what makes sense. So, it's all about the data, right? How are you going to analyze it, slice and dice it, and action it?
Yeah, one of the big things, to your point, that we offer reporting about and even insights about in our platform and Marketing Command at AgencyTHE is we'll give people an understanding of what their actual customer acquisition cost is currently, and even by channel, right? And then we help them to understand what their lifetime customer value is in a couple of different pivots, right? So what can you expect to generate in revenue from this person in 1 year, and 3 years, and 5 years, so on and so forth, right? Yep. And it's interesting because the first foray I ever had to that when I was at CI, which I remember vividly, back in, let's say, 2008 or so, I had already worked with Apple when they launched the iPhone, which was fascinating. I had worked with Office Max, which at the time was internet retailer number 6, so the sixth highest revenue generating retailer at the time. But the smartest retailer I worked with was diapers.com. And their parent company, Quidsy, about 1.5 years after I worked with them, was bought by Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. And what was interesting about Quidsy was they very calmly, unlike any other retailer I worked with or brand I worked with, and I had worked with quite a few, Neiman's, Ann Taylor, Williams-Sonoma Group, they all had cost of sale or ROAS as goal. Same thing. It's just a different way of looking at the same data, right? How much is it costing me to sell, or what kind of ROI do I get? They didn't care about that. They said, we don't want ROAS to be our, linchpin for this. We want cost per order. Why? And they said, we have data internally that makes us feel comfortable realizing that the campaigns that you're managing for us are customer acquisition campaigns. We're winning new customers with these. And as a result of that, all we care about is whether or not the cost per order is low enough where it's lower than our lifetime value. Because guess what? If you buy diapers, you're going to need diapers again, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
with our retention programs, we feel comfortable that if they buy diapers from us the first time, since we're price competitive, we ship fast, we offer good customer service experience, yada, 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 that we can win their business again. So to your point, it's short-sighted to that pivot to always think of things from a ROAS perspective. And that's where the real value comes in when you're a brand or a retailer, right? It's challenging if you only offer a few products, or the product is so good that it only needs to be replaced when you offer the upgraded version in every 2 or 3 years when you re-release it. And we've had those situations with clients before. But when you're a bigger company, you have a breadth of products to be able to offer them. Again, I go back to apparel. If you sold them shorts, why aren't you trying to sell them a polo shirt? If you sell them a blouse, why aren't you trying to sell them shoes that match that style? Why aren't you helping them to accessorize that, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you increase that lifetime value. And everybody says that they do that. But the real question is, are you actually following, not just looking at the data? Have you ever even tried going through customer experience as though you are a shopper yourself, right? And so many directors of marketing, VPs of marketing, heads of e-commerce that I've talked to, I said, when was the last time you shopped your own store like a customer? What do you mean? Do it. And you should do it at least every 3 months, because you as a smart marketer will uncover these things where you go, why did it take an hour and a half to get the order confirmation email, or whatever it is? Or why does my order confirmation email just say a number and it has no branded anything in it, when here's an opportunity to have another great marketing touch point to show them that we're the type of brand that's fun to shop with, right? And that,
even in that confirmation, you talked about the shirt and the pants. If they bought the shirt, well, maybe I should add on some related products that they might have been like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, but actually they're doing me a favor by pointing it out to me. I'm going to add that to my order, or add that as a separate order, or what have you. I totally agree. I think it's important for all executives to look at their products every single day and look at the experience. But I think, to your point, periodically, I think your suggestion of once a quarter makes total sense, to actually make a purchase and see end to end, how did that go? Did you find with search what you were looking for? Did you have all of the information you need? Was it clear, concise, and to the point? Where, like at Amazon, I believe they say their average time on page is like 6 seconds. Within 6 seconds, is the customer determining what it is that they are looking for? And yes, this checks the boxes. And they can add to cart very easily. There's no distractions. They're going to keep them from converting through the cart checkout process. Is it easy to enter all their information? Do they get good, fast order confirmation? I can't tell you how many times I've ordered something and I'm like, did I actually place the order? Because the information didn't come through on an email right away. Was there a glitch? Time for on page is really important, but time post-purchase for those acknowledgments also matters. It can't be just queued up, like you said, for hours later, leaving consumers in suspense. So you're finding out and uncovering all of those things and being able to have an impact on it. And I love, you mentioned about the upsell, cross sell for increasing the lifetime value and the average order value and average units per transaction and all the other things that go into it. How do you track, using data, the consumers that are going to be likely to want to buy other items? So like if they bought this series of product, they're probably going to like to see marketing around other series of product. Or maybe they bought a size 10 shoe. are you actually attributing that this customer buys a size 10 men's shoe and they likely buy white? Are you remarketing those types of products that would be of interest to that customer specifically? Are you trying to leverage the data to get as much detailed insight as possible so you can retarget, you can market to those customers with valuable content, not just spray and pray, as some people say?
Yeah. Related to those points too, you mentioned what kind of service or engagement happens post-purchase. Something else that I encourage executives to do is two things. One, every 3 months, maybe even every 1 month, spend 20 minutes, pick up the phone and call a random customer that has bought something from you and thank them. They will absolutely go out to social media and go, incredible, so-and-so brand, the vice president of marketing contacted me directly, human phone call. They care about their customer. Wild in an age of AI that a human being bothered to have a human conversation about me and thank me for my purchase, right?
Yeah.
So, I grew up a little bit toward the end of the Sears catalog era, right? And when you talked about the service merchandises in the Sears in the 80s, right? The kinds of salespeople that worked there were making pretty decent money, and they would actually thank you for your purchase. Why? Because they're commissioned salespeople and they wanted to get the next sale because they're trying to build a personal relationship with you. In the age of digital, it's harder to do that, right? So we need to think about other digital touch points we can do at scale, because when you have 100,000 customers or 1 million customers or more, you obviously can't make that many phone calls, but you can effectuate making one phone call. Do it. The other thing that I would say is during our onboarding, one thing is that shocked a couple of clients of ours, and they go, "Oh, we weren't expecting you to do that." And then they were taken back and they said, "Actually, I guess that's great you did it." So two things that we do is we find contact information that's on their website, right? Email address for customer service, and we email it and we ask them a question. Phone number, if there is one, we call it. If there's a form on the website, we submit one. We see how long it takes for them to respond. If we ever get a response, if the response makes any sense. One of the times that we onboarded a customer they did about $20 million in e-com revenue. We called the phone number on their website and it was disconnected. They just forgot to update it because they changed from a local phone number to an 800 number and they forgot to update the website. Unfortunately, they didn't redirect the phone number to the other 800 number. And they went, "Oh my gosh, that's probably been that way for at least 30 days.
Wow.
But humans make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Again, that goes back to did you shop your own website? Did you shop your brand? Right?
Yeah.
Try it. See what it's like as a consumer. And when we talked about cross-selling, everybody says that they're going to cross-sell. When you try that as a VP of marketing or a CMO or whatever it is, how were the suggestions? Did you go, wait a minute, I bought a red top and it's telling me to pair it with a green skirt and we're in May? What is this, Christmas? Like, it makes no sense, right? Yeah. So are you doing that through an algorithm? Ask your team, is it being manually merchandised? And somebody that doesn't understand color schemes and style and fashion is the one that's currently responsible for it. Put a more appropriate person on it, right? Again, shopping your own website and following that consumer experience is really important so that you yourself know what it's like to be a customer of your own business, right?
Yeah. And I like the phone idea. I hadn't thought of that. I think that's a great idea. And to your point, because it's so abnormal, it would get more social presence, right? And I think that you could do that in a couple different ways. Like you could call, obviously, as you mentioned, you could do some sort of handwritten letter periodically to someone. You could even just say, well, I can't do it at that scale, but how can you make the experience so much better than what the consumer was expecting? And that's what's going to give you the exposure. I mean, even if you're buying like a luxury good item or something, you would expect there to be like a box opening experience where you open it and it's like nicely presented and stuff. If you just get a product in a clear, a Ziploc bag or poly bag or something, and it's just got a sticker on it, it feels generic and doesn't feel very satisfactory. So think about, how can I elevate the experience in every chance that you can possibly interact with the customer?
Yeah. So anybody who is looking to get assistance in data engineering, in analytical work related to marketing data, e-commerce data, we love to help. I'd love for somebody to send me an email. You can do it at daniel@AgencyTHE.net. So Daniel@AgencyTHE.net.
Great.
Email me directly. I'd love to hear what kinds of challenges a brand or an agency is running into. I love talking with other agency owners to understand what kind of challenges they're running into, because every agency has, when you see the ones that are successful, a lot of agencies have a specialization in service offering. So their search or their social or creative or whatever it is. And then a lot of them that are real successful, you'll see that they've even gone vertical market specific, right? So they're like, oh, well, we only work with tech companies, or, oh, we only work with CPG companies. Not to say that people can't be successful outside of that, but it's always interesting seeing how the challenges are a little bit different for that, right? So
yeah,
I love hearing those, love to be able to help wherever we can.
Awesome.
And this has been great. I appreciate your time, Steve.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. It was great. As the audience has heard, they can reach out to you via email. Any other ways that you'd like them to reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, our website actually does a pretty good job of explaining a lot of the things that we do, and you can find it at AgencyTHE.net. So that's AgencyTHE.net. Check it out, because we do talk about a lot of the challenges there and our particular methodology for data, in particular data management, and how we gather data, manipulate data, and then formulate decisions or consulting advice that we can offer to brands or to other agencies, right? But the email is a great way to get in touch with me. That is my direct email. But you can also book time directly with me on the website. That's my calendar that we have available there. And happy to go through a discovery call with anyone that's interested.
Perfect. Sounds good. One thing we didn't talk about, but maybe they could reach out to you for some help on, is SKU rationalization and how to leverage data to uncover what SKUs should continue to be accelerated and which SKUs should be cut. I think it's always healthy for a brand to have a process where they're cutting the lower performing items and reinvesting in new, constantly keeping the assortment fresh and cutting out the things just don't work. And by the way, maybe it doesn't work because of the data is telling you that it's not working, but it's fixable. Price is wrong, the presentation's wrong, what have you. So,
one thing I was just going to throw in related to that, which is kind of interesting, is parent-child relationships, again, with things like apparel, are very relevant. So we've even seen things where a style works in apparel, but a certain color is terrible. And then you look at, how do yellow tops work for women? Oh my gosh, they are not selling well this season. Maybe nobody wants to buy a yellow top this season because the demand you're trying to create as a brand is not successful with that particular color. That doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and discontinue a whole style. Just delist that particular color even, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway.
All right. Well, sounds good. Thanks so much, Dan. It was great having you on. And for those in the audience, you know me, Steve Yates. You can search me on LinkedIn or go to primeguidance.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Steve.